Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Decca Eloquence's Peter Maag box, the complete Decca recordings. Now, Peter Maag is one of those conductors who had sort of a cult following and a certain mystique around him because he didn't make that many records, although this contains 20 of them, although a bunch of them you'll see are operas and things where he's accompanying. But he later in life did some recordings for arts music. He did some, I believe, some Mozart symphonies. He did a Beethoven cycle, and he did a Schubert cycle, not with the greatest orchestras. See, the thing about Maag was that he was as much concerned with his spiritual life as with his career, which is an admirable thing as far as it goes. But it did not allow him to consistently remain in one place for a long time and accumulate a large discography. That said, he was extremely gifted, and he was really beloved for his seriousness and his musicality by just about everyone who worked with him. He was the assistant at one point or another to Furtwängler and Ansermet, and you could not have more diametric polar opposites aesthetically than those two characters. And, he took several years off in his career to go to a Buddhist retreat and find himself because he was he felt lost in the business side of things and the career side of things. He was not, in a sense, suited to a modern day career as a powerhouse conductor. And so he wasn't. His discography consists primarily of Mozart, Mendelssohn, and a couple other composers and a couple of operas. And that's about it. That's really about it. But it is nonetheless a distinguished discography because he was one of those conductors who had a certain quality image and a level of accomplishment that he never fell below. He was too serious a musician for that. And if you really, everyone will ask the question, well, was he a great conductor? I would say the answer is no. But it depends on the definition you use of greatness. But I would say no because he just didn't leave us enough. He didn't leave us enough to make comparisons and judge. But is his discography excellent? Uniformly excellent? Basically, yes. Most of it really is. It's very, very good. So let's just go through these 20 discs and talk about what's on them a little bit. And it won't take very long because, like I said, they tend to fall neatly into composer categories. The first 8 discs, for example, are all Mozart. And really good Mozart. His Mozart was heartfelt and stylish, and maybe because of his connection with Furtwängler, I don't know, but he really had a feeling for that long singing line, the kind of thing that Furtwängler was very, very good at doing. That long legato line, that vocal line, that human warmth that permeates all of Mozart's music. But unlike Furtwängler, his Mozart is quite a bit perkier and more stylish than Furtwängler's usually was. It's beautifully done, just sensitive and beautifully done. And what we get is, let's see, the Serenade number 4 in D major, that's Koschel 203. And then the Post-Horn Serenade. These are with the New Symphony Orchestra of London and the Orchestra de la Suisse Romande, which he certainly got to know, not just because he was Swiss, but because he was working with Ansermet. And then we get symphonies 28, 29, and 34, also with the Orchestra de la Suisse Romande. And some of these, let me just see here, they were done mostly in the 50s. Let me see if I can get the original dates. 53, 51, somewhere around there. These are mono recordings to begin with. And then we get symphonies 32, 38, and the Clarinet Concerto with the Gervais de Payer, the London Symphony Orchestra. Beautiful performance, especially the Clarinet Concerto. It's one of the great ones. It really is. And then we get Barry Tuckwell doing the horn concertos. All 4 of the little suckers, and playing them quite marvelously. Although, the Mozart horn concertos are not great Mozart, and they all kind of sound the same, at least similar to each other. But they are iconic works for the French horn. And then we have piano concertos 11 and 20, not 11, 13, what am I saying? 13 and 20 with Julius Katchen. And again, with the New Symphony Orchestra of London, these are mono recordings as well. But it's always wonderful to have Julius Katchen. And Maag is a really fine sensitive accompanist who manages to both have his way with the music and support his soloist. I mean, it's a real collaborative effort. He was an extremely collaborative artist. Everybody who worked with him thought so. And you can hear that in these performances, which makes them kind of special as partnerships, even if they aren't perhaps the most exciting or thrilling version of each work. And that, like I said, it matters a lot because you do get a complete aesthetic experience, let's just say. All right, CD 6, Violin Concerto 3, the Adagio for violin and orchestra in E major, Violin Concerto 5, and the Rondo in C for violin and orchestra with Josh Bell, and the English Chamber Orchestra. Of course, nowadays Joshua Bell conducts, and he plays while he's conducting and conducts while he's playing, and it's so much better when you have a real conductor to work with. I really believe that, and I continue to believe it in these performances, I think, and offer a certain amount of evidence to that effect. And then, let's see, we get Serenade number 8, the Notturno for 4 orchestras, and then the actual Serenata Notturna. It's such a lovely piece. It really is just a lovely, lovely little piece. And the Overture to Lucio Silla, and the ballet from Thamos, King of Egypt, or the interludes from Thamos, King of Egypt, Tamos, whatever you want to call him, the King of Egypt guy. It's incidental music. And then 6 German dances were on CD 8, and a bunch more. Well, they're basically Mozart dances. And let's see, some stuff from Don Giovanni, some arias with Fernando Corena, bass. And, let's see, this stuff. And then a bit of the Mass in C minor. Oh, some arias, including the Alleluia from Esultate Jubilate with Jennifer Vivian. And it's lovely Mozart. So, once we get done with the Mozart, we have Mendelssohn. And Peter Maag's Mendelssohn has been raved about as, reference Mendelssohn since the day it was issued. And, I used to think that a lot of that was just the usual, sort of English pushing things that happened in England stuff and that were on Decca and that featured the London Symphony. But, listening to these things again after many, 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 many decades, they hold up. They hold up as well as anybody's Mendelssohn has. They are exquisitely warm, beautiful, well-balanced, intelligent performances. And you get the Scottish Symphony, you get the Overture to the Hebrides, Fingal's Cave, and you get Mendelssohn's Overture and Incidental Music from A Midsummer Night's Dream, all of which is just marvelously done. And the Mendelssohn incidental music includes the vocal bits. It's really, really beautiful. And just a testament to his artistry and his, I think, musicality that these performances have held up so well. Because let's face it, there's been a lot of really good Mendelssohn over the years. And people who are really, it's not difficult music to interpret, actually, but these performances are as good as any. They truly are. The Overture to A Midsummer Night's Dream is miraculously wonderful. It really is. And then we have Chopin, Les Sylphides, arranged by Roy Douglas, with the Paris Conservatory Orchestra. And, I always love to hear them, as you know. They were so wonderful. And it's so good to hear them play in this repertoire. Then they do 4 Rossini overtures. We're already on CD 11. See how quickly this is going to go? William Tell, Cenerentola, Semiramide, and La Cazzaladra. The 4 sort of beefy, big overtures. And then Delibes, music from La Source, the ballet. I love Delibes. I did a talk on Delibes as part of our road music series. He is so underrated. He was a master, an absolute master. Tchaikovsky admired him like crazy, and Tchaikovsky knew what he was talking about. Delibes is gorgeous, and this again is with the Paris Conservatory Orchestra, which is just delicious. Then we got a couple of concertos with the very young Peter Jablonski, or however he wants to pronounce it. You get the Tchaikovsky and the Grieg piano concertos. Now, see, here you go where, Jablonski was young, and he's probably nobody's idea of one of the great pianists of the 20th century, but he certainly has the chops for the music. He plays it sensitively, and Maag accompanies wonderfully. Absolutely beautifully. And it's a lovely way. I always said, accompanists don't get a lot of credit. Sometimes I don't give them a lot of credit because a good conductor should always be able to accompany. But there's a difference between being a good accompanist and a genuine collaborator. And Maag was a genuine collaborator. And you hear that. You hear that in the way he shapes the orchestral sections, the purely orchestral sections, and the way he interacts with his soloists. They're beautiful performances. And next, Maag discovered Ferdinand Pear's opera Leonora. He discovered the manuscript someplace in Italy when he was digging around and recorded it. And that's really a fascinating recording historically, because as we all know, the plot is the same as Beethoven's Fidelio. And the actual dramatic structure of the piece is better than Beethoven's Fidelio. Unfortunately, you don't get the text and translations for either of these operas or any of the other vocal bits, which as always is annoying, but it's a budget release or a less expensive release in any case. And beggars can't be choosers. And then we have Verdi, Luisa Miller. This is the classic Luisa Miller. It's the one with Pavarotti and Caballé and all those people doing their Verdi stuff. Isn't it? Like Anna Reynolds? Yeah, there it is. Got Cheryl Milnes and Richard Van Allen. And oh, it's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Luisa Miller happens to be a really good opera. It really is beautiful. A lovely, lovely opera. There's a note in the score that says, do not use the bass drum. It's scored for no extra percussion other than timpani, which is very, very unusual for an Italian opera of the day. But it's maybe the first early Verdi opera where we see him or hear him really entering into the spirit of the piece by trying to create a unique instrumental coloration for the entire opera. And it's beautiful. It's absolutely, it's a good story. It's plots by Schiller. I mean, what's not to love? You know, isn't it based on Schiller? They tell me. I mean, I know it is, but I always get it wrong. So I figured I would. Yes, thank you. Yes, it's based on Schiller's play Caballé and Liebe. You know, which is what it sounds like. It's cabals and love. You know, so plotting and loving and stuff like that. And it's marvelous. Then we get a nifty little disc of sort of offbeat Italian repertoire for disc 17. The Bellini Oboe Concerto in E flat, and Salieri's Concerto in C major for flute, oboe, and orchestra, and Cimarosa's Concerto in C major, for oboe and orchestra, and Donizetti's Concertino in G major for English horn and orchestra. This is with Heinz Holliger and Aurel Nicolet and the Bamberg Symphony. And these are lovely works. They're wonderful to have a little bit of unusual repertoire, and it's just really nice that this is part of Maag's discography to sort of open it out a little bit, even though he's just the accompanist technically. And then we have, I remember this one. This didn't make my list of great Dvorak piano concertos. And a bunch of you who would, some of you who had bought this box a while ago said, oh, Edith Peinemann. Oh, you forgot Edith Peinemann. Well, I didn't forget Edith Peinemann. I'm not so impressed with Edith Peinemann, but it's a very nice performance of the Dvorak Violin Concerto. I think it's a little bit on the slow side, especially in the finale. But, who am I, right? Some people swear by it, and you get Ravel's Zigane. Oh, God. The most awful piece Ravel ever wrote. I never get tired of telling everyone how terrible Zigane is, and it doesn't sound better. But here's something really cool. The orchestra is the Czech fill. So I suppose when you put together Maag and the Czech fill and Peinemann, you get, I mean, it's not bad in aggregate. It's still not one of my favorites. It just isn't. But it's pretty decent. It's pretty decent. And I know that there are some Edith Peinemann fans out there who just insist that it has to be wonderful. But, I'm not one of them. And then we get Wagner. We get some songs, arias, whatever they're called, the things that opera people do, when their mouths are moving and sound is coming out. Yes, that's an aria. And also from Fidelio and from Die Freischütz, the tenor stuff, with the tenor Tycho Parley, with the orchestra of the Deutschen Oper Berlin. Haven't heard much from him since then, have we? Want to hear why? He's not bad. He's not bad. Was it a great voice? No, not really. He's sensible. It's okay. It's not something I'm going to play more than once in my life. And then we have the Schumann Piano Concerto and the Chopin Piano Concerto number 2. These are with the London Symphony and Peter Maag. Yeah, there we go. Do you want to know who the pianist is? Futsong. And it's a rare entry in the Futsong discography. You know, he won the Chopin competition, and he did a bunch of Chopin recordings for Sony, which are due to be reissued shortly. So Futsong fans, get ready. And you know, he was one of the first Asian classical artists to really make a splash in the West. And I think that to have him do these 2 concertos is really nice to have. These were Westminster recordings. They were not fabulously recorded. Sonically, they're okay, but they're not great. But the performances are lovely. The Schumann particularly is lovely. The booklet notes talk about how the sound was sort of so-so, but the Schumann is the standout performance here, even though Futsong was really known for his Chopin, which is not too shabby either, frankly. And is there anything else left? Yes. Let me see. No. I think that's it. That's disc 20. That's the whole set. Pretty cool. We got through it quickly. The other thing I want to tell you about, though, and it's something you really have to know, is that I waited a while before doing this. First of all, because I really wanted to listen carefully again, because when you're dealing with a conductor who only records, a small handful of composers and repertoire that's pretty standard and that's been done a million times, I don't want to make exaggerated claims for it. I really don't. I think the excellence and seriousness of Maag's work really speaks for itself. It's obvious when you hear it. But the other reason I waited, other than re-listening to all of this stuff, is that there were some production problems with his set. Some of the things got scrambled up. But this being Australian Eloquence, which is run by, competent people who care about selling product, unlike the Decca people in London, for whom, many people are still waiting for their replacement Grumio violin CDs, including me, by the way. Just absurd, those people. Absolutely absurd. But the Eloquence people were decent, and they immediately sent out replacement discs or fixed the set. And this one that I have here is one of the fixed ones. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I got a lot of pleasure out of listening to this repertoire again. I really love the Luisa Miller. It's just one of the great Verdi recordings. Pairs Leonora is a discovery. The Mozart stuff is really very good. The Mendelssohn is outstanding. So your ratio of hits to misses is very, very, very high here. It's a very, very fine set by a niche conductor, someone who is never going to be a huge name, and he's no longer with us. What were his years? Do they tell us? Yeah, 1919 to 2001. And a major artist who went his own way, who I think, and we have to respect that. He did it his way. And I would rather have less of what remains than worse of what remains. And that really is the big deal. This constant demand for more. I don't want to hear anybody in the comments saying things like, oh, wouldn't it have been wonderful if he did the complete Bruckner? I don't know where that came from. Okay, so there you go. Peter Maag, go for it. Thank you for joining me. Keep on listening, folks. Take care.